Our top story tonight, President Trump orders that troops be deployed to protect ICE facilities in Portland. He says it's in response to attacks by Antifa and other domestic terrorists. At least 36 people are dead and 40 others injured in a stampede in India during a rally for a celebrity actor and politician. Trump touted a proposed TikTok deal this week that he says solves national security concerns. A social media expert joins us to discuss that deal and whether it will keep Americans' data safe. In golf, the Ryder Cup has been all Europe so far. Does Team USA have a comeback in them? NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss. ALS, a motor neuron disease that confines Stephen Hawking to his wheelchair, continues to puzzle scientists as to its cause. A neuroscientist shares his insights. And in Paris this week, art dealers and visitors alike gathered to admire rare masterpieces from prestigious collections at one of the leading events in the art world.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Arlene Richards. Today, President Trump ordered that troops be deployed to Portland, Oregon. It's in response to escalating clashes outside federal immigration facilities. In his announcement on Truth Social, Trump said the Secretary of War should provide all necessary troops to protect war-ravaged Portland and ICE facilities under siege from attacks by Antifa and other domestic terrorists. He also said he's authorizing full force if necessary. The ICE facility in Portland has drawn frequent demonstrations that at times have erupted into violence, leaving federal agents injured and prompting assault charges against several protesters. Earlier this month, protesters set up a guillotine outside the site, an act the Department of Homeland Security called unhinged behavior. And the governor of Oregon responded to Trump's announcement earlier today. Here it is.
In my conversations directly with President Trump and Secretary Noem, I have been abundantly clear with them that Portland and the state of Oregon believe in the rule of law, and we can manage our own local public safety needs. There is no insurrection, there is no threat to national security, and there is no need for military troops in our major city. Military service members should be dedicated to real emergencies. The members of the Oregon National Guard, their mission is to stand up and protect Oregonians, and they will do that every day, but they are not needed in the city. They are not needed here.
From a major UN speech and moves against domestic terrorism to changes on health policy, the Trump administration takes on multiple fronts. NTD's Daniel Monahan has your White House week in review.
On Sunday, President Trump and other top administration members spoke at a Charlie Kirk memorial service.
He was a missionary with a noble spirit and a great, great purpose.
Around 200,000 people showed up in Arizona for the event. At the UN General Assembly in New York on Tuesday, President Trump called uncontrolled migration the #1 political issue of the time.
Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders.
Trump met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky after his UN address. He later wrote on Truth Social that Ukraine could get back the original borders from where the war started. Trump also hosted a meeting of Muslim leaders on the sidelines of the UN gathering.
And we're here to see if we can get the hostages back and get the war over and get back to life in the Middle East.
Turning to health, Trump held a White House news conference saying that prenatal use of Tylenol and vaccines could be tied to autism risk.
You shouldn't take it during the entire pregnancy.
Senator Bill Cassidy said there's a concern that women will be left with no options to manage pain in pregnancy. President Trump welcomed Turkish President Erdogan to the White House this week.
It's a pleasure to be with President Erdogan of Turkey, and we've been friends for a long time, actually, even for 4 years when I was in exile, unfairly, as it turns out.
An ICE facility in Dallas, Texas was targeted in a shooting, leaving 1 detainee dead, 2 more injured.
The radical left is causing the problem. The right's not doing this. They're not doing it, and they better not get them energized because it won't be good for the left. And I don't want to see that happen either. I'm the president of all the people.
The alleged gunman, who took his own life, wrote anti-ICE on an unused bullet. Trump issued a presidential memorandum on Thursday aimed at countering domestic terrorism.
These are anarchists and agitators, professional anarchists and agitators, and they get hired by wealthy people, some of whom I know, I guess.
We are properly going to chase them down like the domestic terrorists that they are, and our streets and our communities are going to be safer.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Former FBI Director James Comey was indicted, accused of making a false statement and obstruction in a criminal case.
My heart is broken for the Department of Justice, but I have great confidence in the federal judicial system.
He did terrible things at the FBI, and but I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen.
President Trump welcomed the elite Marine Corps silent drill platoon to the Oval Office, personally presenting each member with a presidential challenge coin.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. We appreciate the opportunity.
Well, it's my honor. You're great people.
President Trump attended the 2025 Ryder Cup at Bethpage Black. Golfer Scotty Scheffler says Trump treats everybody the same and with the utmost respect.
Whether you're the person serving us lunch or the caddy on the golf course or the guy who's the president of the club that we're at, he treats everybody like they're the greatest person in the world.
And the Elon Musk-Trump thaw continues. The Trump administration announced it will use Musk's AI Grok chatbot for federal agencies. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
As Turning Point USA continues to expand its presence across the country, NTD's Sam Wong was out on the National Mall in D.C. to hear from people about Charlie Kirk's legacy and what's next for his organization.
What does Charlie Kirk mean to you, and what do you think his most important legacy is?
Being a Christian and a follower of Jesus Christ. And this, I think, is the beginning of a great revival.
I started watching Charlie when he was about 18 years old, and he just impressed me with his intelligence and the respect that he had for the people that he was talking to. We should be able to disagree and still be agreeable with each other, so that's what he did.
The most impressive, memorable thing is, again, being able to argue with people and stay calm, not raise your voice, not make them feel belittled, and get your point across while still trying to explain to them what you feel is wrong about theirs.
He just told the truth, and some people couldn't handle the truth. Well, it's a sad day in history.
Over the weekend, there was a memorial for Charlie Kirk in Arizona. There was this big message about forgiveness, faith, and revival. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that's part of the healing process, isn't it? I mean, we all need to come together and heal.
When she said, she talked about how Christ said, Father, forgive them for they know what they do. And then she turned around and she said, for the man, that killed my husband, I forgive you. Yes. That was powerful.
Humanly, how could someone forgive someone that had just killed her husband? What a testimony, right?
I think it's going to open up a lot of eyes and hearts. As our Sunday school teacher said, he's like a martyr, like Stephen was.
How does it make you feel seeing Turning Point USA becoming as big as it is today, even bigger than before?
Very happy. His life meant a lot.
Within a week after he was shot, they've had 37,000 requests to start chapters. And even before that, there was a turning of young people starting to turn back to God and go to church. And I think that's going to explode.
Many, many times in history, when you try to shut something down by an act of violence, it gets bigger and more prevalent. And I think that's probably what's happening here.
Even if he had nothing like this had ever happened, I feel like there was already a sweeping change going, especially in college campuses, and I think it was needed. The Bible says we're going to be reviled and persecuted for our faith sometimes, and unfortunately, that was severe, but that's what happened. So I hope that people that have faith are not going to be afraid to speak up and still have conversations. I think that's important.
On Friday, the State Department moved to revoke the Colombian president's visa. That's after he called on U.S. soldiers to disobey President Trump's orders. Colombian President Gustavo Petro made the comments during his visit to New York at a pro-Palestinian rally. He was in town for the United Nations General Assembly. In his speech, Petro called on other nations to form a powerful army to help defend Palestinian territories from the Israel-Hamas war. President Trump has been pushing for an end to hostilities in Gaza and the release of hostages. The State Department said it would revoke Petro's visa due to his, quote, reckless and incendiary actions. It's unclear whether he's still in the city. This week, the White House Office of Management and Budget has asked federal agencies to prepare for a reduction in workforce as Senate Democrats maintain their position of forcing a government shutdown. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
The President of the United States is saying, I'm going to take away your health care, and if you stand up for that, well, then I'll turn around and lay off people, fire workers.
Senate Democrats who refused to extend government funding past September 30th are now blaming President Trump for taking preemptive action on an imminent government shutdown by preparing a reduction in force of non-essential federal government personnel. The Office of Management and Budget's letter to federal agencies seeks to rein in spending in preparation for a lapse in funding that may start on October 1st if Senate Democrats refuse to fund the government.
Well, let's be clear about where we are. House Republicans passed a continuing resolution last week to keep the government funded and open. There is not one legitimate reason that Democrats should not support a continuing resolution. They have voted for it every time when Joe Biden and Barack Obama were president.
The messaging from Democratic leadership has been to portray the expiration of COVID-era healthcare tax credits as a Republican choice to cut healthcare, despite the fact that it was Democrats who set the expiration of those premiums back in 2021 through their Inflation Reduction Act reconciliation bill.
Republicans have made their intentions clear as it relates to healthcare of the American people. They want to destroy it. Republicans have spent the entire year destroying the health care of the American people. Our position is clear. Cancel the cuts, lower the cost, save health care.
Republican leadership remains open to discuss some form of extension of these health care credits. Senate Democrats will have another chance at avoiding a government shutdown next week when the Senate will likely vote again on the House-passed continuing resolution.
A lot of these folks get auto-enrolled. The payments are made directly to the insurance companies. Like I said, this is a program that needs reform, but I think everybody is willing to sit down and talk about how to make that happen in a context where it should be discussed, not as a hostage to keep the government open. I mean,
it's important to note that despite being in the majority in both chambers, Republicans have conceded to maintaining current levels of government spending instead of reducing them. President Trump supports congressional Republicans' efforts to maintain the government open and avoid unnecessary reductions in force of the federal government. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
In India, at least 36 people dead and 40 others injured in a stampede for a celebrity actor and politician. The health minister of the southern state of Tamil Nadu confirmed the numbers of deaths and injuries. He said the victims were dead by the time they were taken to a hospital and that the injured were stable. The dead included 8 children. Officials said tens of thousands attended the rally for Vijay, one of the state's most successful actors turned politician. Indian media reports quoting local officials said the stampede was triggered when a group of Vijay's supporters and fans fell while trying to get close to his bus. In a statement, the actor expressed his condolences and prayed for the swift recovery of those being treated. Coming up, a discussion on a proposed U.S. TikTok deal that hasn't been signed yet. Why is China so quiet? And in golf news, after a rough day one at the Ryder Cup, does Team USA have a comeback in them? NTD's Dave Martin joins us with an update. More when we come back after the break. President Trump this week signed an executive order that paved the way for a deal that would keep TikTok operating in the U.S. The order declares that the deal represents a qualified divestiture that satisfies a law passed by Congress requiring TikTok's China-based parent company to divest or face a ban. But looming questions remain, such as whether TikTok users will be safe from Communist Party influence. Joining me to discuss is Dr. Andrew Selepak, a social media professor at the University of Florida. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, there's a big question about whether the U.S. is actually going to have control of TikTok's algorithm. So what is it about the TikTok algorithm that has the U.S. concerned about this national security?
Well, I think there's a lot of concerns in terms of just what percentage ByteDance and therefore the CCP will still have some sort of control or even be able to generate revenue off of it. There's questions of whether or not ByteDance will still be in control of this American version's advertising and even e-commerce. And then there's also the fact of within this potential plan that, is still kind of seems to be in the works. You have a lot of different kind of fingers in the pot. You've got Rupert Murdoch involved. You've got Oracle with Larry Ellison involved. You've got the UAE royal family involved. You still have ByteDance involved. So there's a lot of different parts to this, and I don't think we quite understand what's going to happen. The idea is that Oracle will have basically control over Americans' data, and the investors will have access to this, really kind of unique in some ways in terms of how well it works, TikTok algorithm, but we still have the devil in the details with this.
Well, let's get into that a little bit more and talk about this algorithm. So what is it about this algorithm that makes it so much more engaging than, say, YouTube or Instagram? How does it work?
Well, the big thing is people have to keep in mind that TikTok is a unique platform in the fact that in terms of people who are using it, we're not connecting. You don't have to connect with friends and family. If you go on to Instagram, you're kind of encouraged to follow friends, family, follow brands. With TikTok, you can create an account and follow no one, and you will still get a limitless amount of content just simply based on one, what you're looking at, how long you look at it, if you engage with it. But then there's also the fact that the algorithm can make decisions in terms of what type of content it's going to maybe push, throttle up, throttle down, shadow ban. And one of the big things is kind of, getting this maybe look behind the scenes, kind of, look under the hood of how this algorithm has been operating. If we're actually going to see how this algorithm has been operating and maybe how it's been manipulated when it comes to not only American users, but global users. So we don't know exactly what type of algorithm we're going to get, because if the Chinese government has had their thumb on the scale, it's pretty clear that they're not going to include that in anything that's being purchased. So we still might not know exactly what they've been doing, if anything.
So you've talked a little bit about this plan, and let's go into this a little bit more. So the executive order lays out a proposed deal that would allow for ByteDance to keep about 20% ownership in the U.S., but they wouldn't have a seat on this security committee. So if signed, would this deal actually solve these national security concerns, in your opinion?
Well, I think there's the potential for it simply because you have these other people, other entities, again, Oracle, Rupert Murdoch, the private equity companies and the involvement of the UAE royal family. I'm sure part of the money that they're going to put into this is they're going to want to have access to how does the app operate. They're not just going, and maybe not specifically Rupert Murdoch, but they're going to want to have access and knowledge of how's the algorithm working, how has this been so successful. I can't imagine they're going to have a completely hands-off approach and let it kind of keep running as is, even this American part where we're looking at Oracle kind of being in sole control over user data from here in the United States. I think another big question is if this was to happen, how does this impact other countries? Especially if you think about sort of our closest allies, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, how are they going to be impacted by them still having this sort of separate TikTok where their data and their algorithms could be manipulated by the CCP, manipulated by ByteDance and so forth. So there's a lot that we still don't know. And part of it is even after this sale maybe eventually goes through, how this still impacts, again, some of our closest allies and even, our non-allies, how it's going to impact there.
Now, Vice President Vance played a key role during the negotiation, and he seems confident that a deal will be signed despite what he says was some resistance from the Chinese side. So let's listen to his comment.
This deal really does mean that Americans can use TikTok, but actually use it with more confidence than they had in the past, because their data is going to be secure and it's not going to be used as a propaganda weapon against our fellow citizens.
Now, the vice president is pretty confident here, but Andrew, we know that bad actors from China, Russia, and other nations use American platforms like YouTube and Facebook to hit Americans with propaganda. So can anyone really say that TikTok won't be used as a propaganda weapon going forward? I mean, can we really predict that?
Well, there's two things. You can see where on other platforms outside of TikTok that you can have bad actors and you can have this disinformation being spread by North Korea, Iran, China, Russia. That's through the creation of bots. That's through the creation of accounts. That's by basically creating trending topics or pushing topics, making them more popular within the algorithm on these different platforms. The difference, what we're talking about with TikTok, is the potential that the Chinese government not was manipulating what was popular and what was going viral, but manipulating the algorithm itself, where you don't need the bots. You don't need to kind of create a bunch of fake accounts. You can just make certain topics, certain users, certain content get visibility or bury it. So, we would assume that topics like Tiananmen Square, topics, previously like, the Hong Kong democracy rallies, those topics were probably buried within the platform, whereas, content that was maybe more positive towards the Chinese government or negative towards anybody that the Chinese government didn't view positively could have gotten buried, throttled down, including users and topics. So there's a difference between being concerned that there might be platform manipulation from bad actors on these other platforms as opposed to manipulation of the algorithm itself. And that's still where we have this issue of how's the algorithm going to operate? What algorithm are you going to get? And will this algorithm that we've been concerned about, because we haven't had a look under the hood, will that still operate among our allies and even our enemies across the world?
So now if we look at social media safety more broadly, not just TikTok, even if this app were to be, say, 100% American owned, there's no guarantee that it would be free from unhealthy content. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, all platforms can have unhealthy content, and unhealthy being a very broad term. I mean, unhealthy could be anything. It could be, positive coverage, positive content accounts created from ISIS that could be on there. Unhealthy could be, pushing for people to, not get certain vaccines or to live unhealthy lifestyles, or the sort of classic ones that we've seen on platforms like TikTok of like the Tide Pod challenge and encouraging, and you have users encouraging other users to eat Tide Pods. So there's a lot of potential dangerous content. And then you just have content as well that's also just very emotional, creates tension, unease, anger, sadness among users. That's the type of content that, based on the algorithm, often gets the most attention, the most views, because people interact with it, they engage with it. The algorithm itself, it does not care about your feelings. The algorithm does not care about its impact. It just wants to put content in front of you it thinks you're going to engage with. And often that content is going to be misinformation, content that makes you upset, that makes you angry, content that either supports your political beliefs or even counters your political beliefs, which people are going to engage with. So that's going to exist simply because an algorithm exists on any platform.
Now, as you said earlier, this deal has not been signed off on yet, but President Trump says that China's leader Xi Jinping verbally signed off on the deal. But I'm noticing that Chinese officials and the state media haven't made any public remarks. So what do you make of that?
I mean, he has, I guess, verbally signed off on the deal. I'm not sure what that really means from a legal perspective. Handshake deals or even verbal agreements don't generally hold up in court. So, I think what we're looking at is, sure, maybe he did say that, but, as much as that may or may not be true, until there's, ink on the paper, we're kind of dealing with what ifs and maybes until then.
Well, it is kind of a maybe, it seems, because China's being very quiet about it. And President Trump has said that we're going to need China in order to make this deal come through. Dr. Andrew Selepak, social media professor at the University of Florida, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up in golf news, after a rough day, won at the Ryder Cup, can Team USA mount a comeback? NTD's Dave Martin joins us to discuss. And in this week's Vital Signs episode, a neuroscientist weighs in on what may be the hidden cause behind the illness that confined Stephen Hawking to his wheelchair. That and more when we come back. And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, welcome as always.
Thank you, Arlene.
And I know you have a very busy sports weekend, so I want to get right to baseball. So this is close to the ending of their season. They've got about 2 games left. Where do things stand for the playoffs?
Yeah, there's still 2 division titles up for grabs, and there's 2 wild card spots in the playoffs still up for grabs here. Now, right now, the Blue Jays and the Yankees, they're tied for first place in the American League East Division. Both won today. Now, Toronto has clinched the tiebreaker scenario, though, so if they end up tied, they win the division. But both teams have already clinched playoff spots. It's just a matter of who gets the wild card, who gets the division title. Now, the AL Central, though, is probably the most fascinating. Detroit, earlier this month, had an 11-game lead over Cleveland. A few weeks later, though, Cleveland's made such a huge comeback. They tied for first place. Cleveland has even clinched the tiebreaker scenario in case they tie, but whoever loses isn't yet guaranteed a playoff spot. They both do lead the Astros by a game there, though. Now, right now, the Tigers are actually playing the Red Sox. They lead 2-1 in the 8th. Guardians play tonight against the Rangers. Then in the National League, got the Mets and the Reds are tied for the final wild card spot. Reds only tiebreaker in this scenario. Now, a few months ago, the Reds actually had the best record in all of baseball, so they've had quite a fall too, just like Detroit has this month. Now, Mets, though, they can still salvage it. They're up 3-0 right now over the Marlins in the 8th inning. Reds play the Brewers tonight, so still plenty to be decided with like 24 hours to go until the regular season ends, that is.
All right, a nail biter.
A nail biter.
A nail biter. So let's move on to golf news. We've got day 2 of the Ryder Cup. Team Europe is dominating, I guess, so far this afternoon. So where does it stand now?
Well, they've got an even bigger lead than they had yesterday. Team Europe is up 10.5 to 3.5. Now there's 2 4-ball matches going on right now, just about over. Both are tied, so it might be 11.5 to 4.5. Now this is being played at Bethpage Black Course in Farmingdale, New York. It's already being called the Bethpage Black Blowout. So not good for the U.S. at all. It's not mathematically over yet. But just to explain, there's a total of 28 matches across these 3 days. Each match is worth a total of 1 point. A tie, you get half a point. So you got 28 points total up for grabs. First team to get to 14.5 points wins. They could tie at 14, though. In that case, Europe would retain the trophy since they won last time. They've actually won a lot recently. 10 of the last 14 Ryder Cups. It'll be 11 out of 15 if the U.S. does not stage a huge comeback tomorrow, and it would be huge if they did. Now, today and yesterday, you had those team events, 4 balls, foursomes, is 2-on-2. Sunday, though, is 12 singles matches, so we'll see what they can come up with. Like I said, it should be, I think, 11.5 to 4.5 after these 2 ties, unless something crazy happened on the 18th hole entering tomorrow. So it's an 11-point lead for Team Europe. U.S. would have to win 10 out of the 12 points tomorrow to somehow forge a tie out of this. So not impossible, but not very likely.
So something could go crazy in golf? Is that right?
You know, it could. I've seen the U.S. stage a big comeback in this before, but boy, this would be epic if they somehow came up with something big tomorrow. But as it stands right now, they're not showing much signs of life. I'll say that.
All right. Well, let's talk about tennis. See if there's any life there. So we know earlier this month, Carlos Alcaraz beat Jannik Sinner to win the U.S. Open, and those two seem to go back and forth. 8 straight times? One or the other is winning. So Alcaraz, although, is always dominating in their head-to-head battles. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you know, very similar to how Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal kind of dominated the game 2 decades ago, yet Nadal had the upper hand in their individual rivalry. Alcaraz has beaten Sinner 7 of the last 8 matches and 10 of 15 overall. Now, these two were recently asked about it. Here's what Alcaraz and Sinner both said.
I know he's gonna change. Change something from the last match. It's the same thing that I did when I lost to him. A couple of times I tried to be better player. Next time I'm gonna face him. So I expect him to do the same thing, to change a few things just to be ready. And I had to be focused and I had to be ready for that changes.
But you know, I think it's tennis is about balance. You know, I don't have to lose the way I'm playing, but just adding small things, small details. We're changing the serve at the moment, and I struggle a little bit more at times, because I'm thinking of quite a lot of things. But I think that's the right path, and adding just small details into my game. It's not only about Carlos. It's about the general level I want to improve. Being an even more complete player, and then we see how it goes.
Yeah, so Alcaraz, you can see there, changed his hairstyle yet again. It's like the third different time this year I've seen him change it. He had the long hair, then the crew cut, now he's colored it. In any case, they both play at the Shanghai Masters next month. They could meet up there. The next major, though, isn't until January, the Australian Open. Like you said, between the two of them, they've won 8 straight Grand Slam titles. And if they meet in the finals of the Australian Open, that'll be 4 straight Grand Slam finals that those two meet at the finals of. That's never happened before. So those two have really separated themselves from the rest of the players, even Djokovic there.
Yeah, he's coloring his hair white, and I'm trying to cover my white. Go figure on that.
Yeah, not many people color their hair white.
He does.
Maybe at that age, it's all right.
Maybe it's all right, yeah. All right, so shifting gears to college football, we have another full slate of games today. 18 ranked teams in action. Most of those games are tonight, though, so what are you going to tell us about that?
Yeah, still plenty of good games this afternoon, including Notre Dame at Arkansas. At least I thought that would be a close one. As it turns out, Notre Dame just blew them out 56-13. Let's take a look at this one. This was over very early. Irish led 42-13 at halftime. Notre Dame quarterback DJ Carr, that is the grandson of former Michigan coach Lloyd Carr. He had a huge day, 354 yards passing, 4 touchdowns. Irish outgained Arkansas 641-365 in total yards. No turnovers for them. Arkansas 2 turnovers. Irish are now 2-2 in the season. They did those 2 very close losses to Miami and Texas A&M. Arkansas, meanwhile, loses its 3rd straight game. Let's look at some more scores here. Illinois hit a last-second field goal to beat USC 34-32 at home, and that was in a battle of top 25 teams. Trojans, that was their first loss this season. 16th-ranked Georgia Tech won at Wake Forest 30-29 in overtime. Yellow Jackets hit a last-second field goal to force overtime. They're now 5-0, and 18th-ranked Vanderbilt beat Utah State 55-35. Commodores are now 5-0. Now, currently in action right now, you've got 4th-ranked LSU trailing 13th-ranked Ole Miss 17-7. Those in the 3rd quarter. Then tonight, like you were alluding to, Alabama, 17th-ranked Alabama is at 5th-ranked Georgia. The Bulldogs, 2.5-point favorites there. Then number 6, Oregon is at 3rd-ranked Penn State. The Nittany Lions are 3.5-point favorites. Both of those games start at 7:30 Eastern time. So it'll be tough to decide which one's going to watch there for sure.
And what about the NFL? I mean, my favorite, of course, because of the fantasy football.
Yeah, you're doing so well.
Big lineup tomorrow, and we're going to have the Vikings and the Steelers in Ireland to start off the morning. What else can we look forward to?
I think the Giants hosting the Chargers is going to be of interest to everybody. LA is 3-0, NY is 0-3, but the Giants are benching starting quarterback Russell Wilson in favor of rookie Jackson Dart. Now, the Giants obviously need some kind of jump start on offense. They did put up 37 points against Dallas a couple weeks ago, but the other 2 games, 9 points against Kansas City, 6 points against Washington. It's not going to really cut it. Dart, meanwhile, they think very highly of. They traded into the 1st round to select him last May after a standout career at Ole Miss. That game's at 1 p.m. Eastern time in New York, or really in New Jersey, actually. I think also Chiefs versus Ravens. Both of these 2 teams are off to 1-2 starts. Both are expected to compete for the AFC title, if not the Super Bowl. Ravens have had 2 close losses. That was a point to Buffalo, 8 points to Detroit. Chiefs, meanwhile, have looked pretty average, losing to the Eagles and the Chargers. I'm interested to see if they can regain their once prolific offense. So Chiefs hosting Ravens at 4:25 Eastern time. Obviously, I am a Chiefs fan too, so I've been watching them very, very closely. So anyway, between the NFL, college football, baseball, Ryder Cup, it's a very big weekend in sports.
Yes, you get those remote controls out and start juggling with the big screen.
Yeah, I really need that picture-in-picture somehow on my TV. I'm really surprised I don't have that. That would be a must-have this weekend for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the report, Dave.
Thank you, Arlene.
All right. ALS is a motor neuron disease that affects the nerves and leads to loss of muscle control. It's what confined renowned physicist Stephen Hawking to his wheelchair. The disease was again in the spotlight in 2023 after it claimed the life of actress Sandra Bullock's boyfriend, Brian Randall. Despite its notoriety, little is known about the cause of this disease, with scientists labeling 90% of cases as occurring randomly. Is the hidden cause of this disease simply being missed? In this episode of Vital Signs, neuroscientist Diane Goodall sat down with Brendan Fallon to explain what he thinks may be the mystery cause of ALS.
We've studied this years and years and years, and we understand a lot of it. And it goes down to fundamentally oxidative stress, okay, is where it happens. But it's oxidative stress on that particular area. And that's what happens in all these diseases. You get these specialization, and they lose one of those things, right? I have a big iPhone, I need a rubidium trace metal. And if you get one manufacturer in China that stops making this trace metal that I need, the entire iPhone doesn't work, for example, right? And that's what specialization does. We become more and more dependent on very, very small, precise deviations in health. And that's what happens here in ALS.
Just to clarify with you, Dr. Goodenow, so the neuron becomes specialized for a specific function and requires certain materials to be able to perform that. And then if one of those materials is no longer available, that leads to the decay of the neuron?
Exactly. And then the targeting, where the targeting comes in, okay, is it's in your brain. And your brain is protected by the blood-brain barrier. So part of the protection that protects your brain from all the environmental stuff in our world has a double-edged sword. Once something gets in your brain, then it's kind of stuck. Now something has come across the castle walls, for example. So now you got to fight that fight on the inside versus on the outside. And that's the problem with all these brain inflammatory diseases. So Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer's, autism. These are diseases that once an insult gets into your brain, or even a stroke or a concussion, then you have this localized issue that stays around. And this is where the progression occurs.
Just 1 second. What leads to it getting through the blood-brain barrier? What creates that situation where the toxin or it gets through the blood-brain barrier?
This is where it becomes very frustrating, okay? Because this is where of all these epidemiological studies clearly indicating environmental toxicity is associated with ALS. But we don't know exactly which one, and it probably isn't one toxin. It's probably a variety of ones that could affect one person versus another. Okay, but we do know that very specific neurotoxins get in through our environment that will very specifically affect certain cell bodies in the body. Parkinson's is a good example. One really good example is a bunch of kids in the 80s were trying to make designer heroin, and they ended up making this molecule called MPTP. And a bunch of 20-year-olds gave themselves Parkinson's using this molecule, which was basically a contaminant of their designer heroin synthesis that they were doing in their home. And so then we found that this molecule, wow, this can very selectively degenerate these dopaminergic neurons. And so here's an example of how a very specific toxin can be incorporated into the body, pass through the blood-brain barrier, and then affect a very, very specific cell type. It doesn't affect all, it doesn't affect your cholinergic, it doesn't affect your cognition, it very specifically affects the Parkinson system, substantia nigra. That's an example. But when you talk about a disease like ALS, we know exactly what it's doing. It's knocking down a very critical enzyme called superoxide dismutase, which neutralizes the superoxide radical. And that's a core component of oxidative stress management in every single cell of your body, not just your motor neurons.
So this superoxide dismutase, if I'm saying it correctly, Dr. Goodenow, is this knocking out a particular free radical, so it's bringing down the oxidative stress?
Exactly. So think about this two-lane superhighway that I was telling you about, this going down from your brain to your spinal cord, right? There's things going on, and there's going to be garbage. There's going to be waste, right? And there's going to be a garbage person coming by, picking up off the waste off the freeway and taking it away. And if that job gets impaired, that is going to start building up and is going to start having effects on the transport system. Okay, and that's not a perfect analogy, but it's pretty close. Superoxide dismutase is the garbage cleanup crew. Okay, they're there to clean up this extra garbage as it happens. And there's many different ways of doing that, but that particular one is impaired in ALS. And it just so happens that these motor neurons in the brain are super sensitive to any disruption in that particular molecule, the superoxide. Whereas other neurons say, okay, I got other ways to clean up the garbage. I can fine, that meant that enzyme's not working so perfect. I got another one that can kind of do part of the job and I can kind of get by, right? But the motor neuron says, well, I don't have any other choice. Like if this guy doesn't work, I'm done, right? I got no backup plan.
To see that full interview and others on how to optimize health, go to ept.ms/vital signs. Vital Signs offers general health information not intended as medical diagnosis or advice. Please consult your doctor before undertaking a new health regimen.
Coming up in Paris this week, hundreds of art dealers gathered at one of the art world's leading events, where visitors had a chance to see rare masterpieces from prestigious collections. David Vives has more on that after the break. This past week, major art fairs returned to the Grand Palais in Paris. Around 100 international art dealers presented rare and remarkable works. NTD International correspondent David Vives reports from Paris.
September marks the return of Paris major art fairs, a highlight of the season for collectors and lovers of art pieces. Around 100 art dealers have gathered from across the world to present their most remarkable art collections. Hosted in the historic Grand Palais, the event offers a rare opportunity to discover treasures, ranging from classical pieces to contemporary gems. Some art dealers say they'll look for purchases that align with their passion. Olivier Trebosque explains that he only purchases objects with a story of their own.
This is from the artist Lyell. He won first prize from the Academy in Paris in 1876 and was allowed to visit Rome to train on antiques. He returned with this sculpture of a young Italian woman wearing jewelry, but his teachers weren't impressed at all with it because it didn't appear antique enough. However, this young woman later became his wife.
Gabriela Sisman says she's often gone through a long process of investigation before buying a piece. That process can take months, even years, to properly identify an object, like this ornament that was once part of a tomb decoration exhibited at the Louvre.
This is our little cherub's head, and when we found it in this private collection, we quickly recognized Pilon's style. But it took a long time, a lot of research time, in libraries and archives, and we also had to consult specialists on Germain Pilon to confirm our hypothesis, which they eventually did.
Amidst the visitors, a few art dealers may make purchases, while most will simply admire the works.
What we have here is a sculpture from the 6th century BC. This piece is called an olpe, classified as Etruscan Corinthian, meaning the Etruscans were imitating contemporary Corinthian ceramics. We see animal motifs, along with a clear aversion to empty space. Notice how the rosettes fill in the background. This feature is typically Eastern in its inspiration.
The Fine Arts Fair plans to return to Paris in the autumn of 2026. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And that's the news for this evening. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Arlene Richards. Good night.